The transport ship's engines roared one last time before going silent. Jake Miller grabbed his duffel bag and stepped onto the metal platform of Titan Base, squinting against the harsh artificial lights. The air tasted metallic and recycled, nothing like the fresh mountain air back home in Colorado. Around him, dozens of other cadets from across the galaxy shuffled nervously, their alien features making Jake feel like he was walking through a science fiction movie. Titan Base stretched out before them like a fortress made of gray metal and harsh angles. Tower after tower rose into the artificial sky of the massive space station, each one designed to house the galaxy's most brutal military training programs. But Jake wasn't here for just any program. He was here for Hell Week, the survival course that had earned a reputation for breaking even the toughest warriors in known space. The reputation was well-deserved. Out of every 100 cadets who entered Hell Week, only about 40 made it to the end. The rest either quit, got carried out on stretchers, or in rare cases, got shipped home in body bags. The galactic military used it as their ultimate test, the final barrier between ordinary soldiers and the elite units that protected civilization from the darkness between stars. Two massive figures emerged from the shadows of the main building, their heavy boots clanging against the metal floor with each step. Jake had seen plenty of aliens during his journey here, but these two were different. These were Draknari, the warrior race that had conquered half their home galaxy before joining the galactic military. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with thick gray skin covered in old battle scars and eyes like burning coals. The first one, wearing sergeant stripes on his dark green uniform, looked like he could bench press a small car. His nameplate read Corax in bold letters. The second sergeant was slightly smaller but twice as mean-looking, with a jagged scar running from his left eye down to his jaw. His nameplate said VX. Sergeant Corax's voice boomed across the platform like thunder. "Listen up, you pathetic excuses for future soldiers. I am Sergeant Corax, and this is Sergeant Vex. For the next week, we own your sorry lives. You eat when we say eat. You sleep when we say sleep. You breathe when we give you permission." The cadets stood at attention, some trembling slightly. Jake noticed most of them were from high-gravity worlds or warrior cultures. There were a few reptilian Zelkari, known for their ability to survive in extreme heat. Several bulky Thraxians, whose home planet had gravity 3 times stronger than Earth's. Even a couple of cybernetic-enhanced Nexri, who could go days without food or water. Then there was Jake, looking completely ordinary next to all these alien warriors. Average height, brown hair, wearing the same standard uniform as everyone else. Nothing special about him at all. Sergeant Vex picked up a digital tablet and started reading names, assigning cadets to different groups. When he got to Jake's name, he barely looked up. Miller, Jake. Human. Planet of origin. He paused and squinted at the screen. Earth. Never heard of it. Probably another one of those garden worlds with cute little animals and perfect weather. He tossed Jake a basic survival pack that felt like it weighed about 20 pounds. Inside would be standard rations, a water purifier, basic medical supplies, and a multi-tool. The same kit every cadet got, designed to provide just enough resources to keep someone alive if they were smart and tough enough to use them properly. "This ain't summer camp, human," Sergeant Corax growled, getting close enough that Jake could smell his breath, which reminded him of sulfur and old meat. "The training zone ahead of you has killed tougher beings than you. It's at acid swamps that'll melt your bones, mountains cold enough to freeze your blood solid, and creatures that consider you a light snack." Jake nodded politely. "Yes, sir. Understood, sir." The sergeant seemed almost disappointed by the calm response. Most cadets were sweating bullets by now, or at least showing some sign of nervousness. But Jake just stood there like he was waiting for directions to the nearest coffee shop. "The course is designed to take a full week," Sergeant Vex continued. "Most of you will be begging to quit by day 3. Those who don't quit will probably be carried out by day 5. The few who actually finish will have earned the right to call themselves real soldiers." He pointed toward a massive gate that led into what looked like a nightmare landscape. Even from a distance, Jake could see twisted trees, glowing pools of something that probably wasn't water, and strange shapes moving in the shadows. You have exactly 60 seconds to say goodbye to your comfortable lives, Korax announced. Then you enter hell. Timer starts now. Jake adjusted his pack straps and took a deep breath. Back home. He'd spent summers camping in the Rocky Mountains, where grizzly bears were real and the weather could kill you if you weren't careful. This couldn't be much worse than that camping trip when he was 12 and got caught in that 3-day blizzard. Could it? 8 hours into Hell Week, the monitoring station buzzed with confused activity. Sergeant Korax stared at the wall of screens, showing dozens of red dots crawling slowly through the training zone. Each dot represented a cadet, and most were moving at exactly the pace he expected. Slow, careful, and already showing signs of exhaustion. But one blue that was moving completely wrong. It had already passed the acid marsh, navigated to the thermal maze, and was now setting up camp near the base of Death Mountain. That should have been impossible. The fastest cadet in Korax's 20-year career had taken 2 full days just to reach that point. "Vex, get over here," Korax called his partner, who was busy laughing at a screen showing a Thraxian cadet stuck waist-deep in the poison bog. "Something's wrong with our tracking system." Sergeant Vex ambled over, still chuckling. "What's the problem? Did someone's beacon fall off again?" "Look at Cadet Miller's position." Korax pointed at the blue that was now somehow building what appeared to be a structured shelter. "Either our computers are broken, or this human just did the impossible." They switched to the live camera feed from that sector. On screen, Jake Miller was calmly weaving branches together with some kind of vine he'd found, creating walls that looked more solid than most of the emergency shelters in their equipment storage. He'd already dug a drainage ditch around his campsite and built what looked like a water collection system using his mess kit and some flat rocks. How did he cross the river? Vex asked, squinting at the screen. The Carathian eels in that water can sense movement from 50 meters away. They're designed to attack anything that tries to swim across. Korax pulled up the replay footage from 6 hours ago. They watched Jake approach the bubbling green river that had stopped a dozen other cadets. Instead of looking for a way around or trying to build a bridge like most cadets attempted, Jake simply sat down and watched the water for about 10 minutes. Then he picked up several rocks and started throwing them in different directions upstream. The massive eel-like creatures came boiling to the surface, snapping at the splashes. Jake counted silently, timing their responses. After another few minutes, he started throwing rocks in a specific pattern, drawing all the creatures to one side of the river. Then he simply walked across at the other end while they were distracted. "That's not supposed to work," Vex muttered. "Those things are engineered predators. They should be smarter than that." "Apparently not smarter than humans," Korax replied, feeling the first stirring of unease in his gut. Pull up his biometric data. The health monitor showed numbers that made both sergeants do a double take. Jake's heart rate was actually lower than when he'd started the course. His stress hormones were at baseline levels. His body temperature was perfectly normal. According to every measurement they had, Jake Miller was having a relaxing day in the park. "This has to be a malfunction," Vex said, tapping the screen. "No one stays calm in the thermal maze. The heat alone should have his stress levels through the roof. And look at this. His breathing rate actually went down while he was in there." They pulled up more footage. The thermal maze was designed to simulate the volcanic conditions on Pyraxis Prime, with temperatures hot enough to cook most organic beings if they stayed too long. The air shimmered with heat waves, and the metal walls glowed cherry red. Most cadets stumbled through it as fast as possible, desperate to reach the cooler air on the other side. Jake had walked through it like he was taking a casual stroll through a shopping mall. He'd even stopped halfway through to drink some water and retie his bootlaces. The cameras showed him looking around with what could only be described as mild interest, like a tourist checking out the local scenery. "Run a diagnostic on all his equipment," Korax ordered. "Maybe he's got some kind of illegal enhancement gear." The scans came back normal. Standard military-issue survival kit, no modifications. No hidden cooling systems or protective gear. Everything Jake had accomplished, he'd done with basic equipment, and whatever he could find in the environment. That's when Sergeant Korax made the mistake that would haunt him for the rest of his career. He decided to look up detailed information about Earth for the first time since Jake had arrived. He'd assumed it was just another pleasant little world with blue skies and gentle rain, the kind of place that produced soft soldiers who needed careful training to toughen them up. The data that came up on his screen made his blood run cold. Earth wasn't listed as a garden world. It wasn't even listed as a standard habitable planet. According to the Galactic Survey database, Earth was classified as a Class 19 death world, a rating so extreme that most species considered planets like it to be uninhabitable nightmare realms. The atmosphere contained a gas so reactive it caused metal to rust and organic matter to burn. The gravity was heavy enough to crush most civilized beings. The weather systems were so violent they regularly destroyed entire cities. And the predator density rating was simply marked with a warning symbol that meant unsurvivable by galactic standards. But the worst part was the radiation data. Earth's star bombarded the planet with enough deadly energy that most species would need full environmental suits just to survive on the surface. Yet somehow, humans had evolved there naturally. Korak stared at the screen, his hands beginning to shake slightly. He looked back at the monitor showing Jake Miller, who was now apparently cooking something over a small fire he'd built from materials that should have been too wet to burn. "Vex," he said quietly, "I think we may have made a serious error." 16 hours into what should have been the most brutal training experience in the galaxy, Sergeant Vex was on his 4th bottle of antacids. The chalky tablets crunched between his teeth as he watched the monitors in growing horror. Every few minutes, he'd pop another handful into his mouth, his stomach churning with stress. On the main screen, Jake Miller was walking through an acid storm like it was a spring shower back home. The corrosive rain that should have been eating through his equipment and skin was just beating up and rolling off his jacket. He'd actually tilted his head back to let some drops hit his face, then made a disgusted expression and spat. "It tastes like battery acid mixed with vinegar." Jake's voice came through the comm system. He was talking to himself, apparently, since no other cadets were anywhere near his position. "Reminds me of that time Tommy dared me to lick a car battery when we were kids. Mom was so mad when she found out." Sergeant Korax slammed his fist against the control panel. How is he not dissolving? That acid is strong enough to melt through titanium plating. They watched Jake pull out his water bottle, pour out the contents, and then hold it up to collect some of the acid rain. After letting it sit for a minute, he carefully used a few drops to clean some rust off his multi-tool. The metal came out shining like new. "Well, that's handy," Jake said cheerfully. "Better than the rust remover we used back in Dad's garage." But the acid storm wasn't even the worst part. What really made Vex's stomach acid churn was what happened when Jake encountered the Razorclaw Stalkers. These were bioengineered predators designed to hunt in packs, with claws that could slice through armor and intelligence levels just high enough to use basic tactics. They were meant to be the stuff of nightmares, the kind of creatures that made hardened warriors wake up screaming. Jake met the first one about an hour after the acid storm passed. The creature, roughly the size of a large wolf but with 6 legs and crystalline claws, came padding out of the shadows between the twisted metal trees. Its red eyes glowed in the dim artificial light as it sized up this potential prey. The monitoring station went silent. Even the background chatter from other instructors stopped as everyone watched to see how quickly they'd need to send a medical team. Jake spotted the creature and immediately crouched down, extending one hand palm up. "Hey there, buddy," he said in the same tone someone might use to greet a neighbor's friendly dog. "You're a pretty scary-looking fellow, aren't you?" The Razorclaw Stalker tilted its head, clearly confused. These creatures were programmed to attack immediately upon contact. But something about Jake's posture and voice made it pause. Instead of lunging forward with claws extended, it took a cautious step closer. "You remind me of Rex, the dog we had when I was growing up," Jake continued, still holding out his hand. He was part German shepherd, part something else that made him look like he could eat small children for breakfast. But he was really just a big softy once you got to know him. The predator sniffed Jake's hand carefully. Finding no signs of fear or aggression, it actually allowed Jake to scratch behind what might have been ears on a normal creature. Within minutes, Jake had the supposedly deadly hunter rolling on its back for belly rubs. "This is impossible," Korax muttered, watching more razor claws emerge in the shadows. Instead of forming a hunting pack, they seemed curious about this strange human who smelled like friendship instead of fear. These things are designed killing machines. They're not supposed to have social instincts. Maybe they do when they're not being threatened, Vex replied, crunching another antacid. Look at him. He's treating them like they're puppies at pet store. Jake had somehow convinced 3 of the creatures to help him gather firewood. They were actually bringing him sticks in their mouths, tails wagging like excited dogs. The whole scene looked like something from a children's nature documentary, rather than a deadly survival exercise. That's when Corax made the decision that would later be used as a case study in military academies across the galaxy on what not to do when your training program fails. He started manually activating advanced scenarios that weren't supposed to be used until day 5 of the course. Environmental hazards that had been tested on elite Special Forces units suddenly came online around Jake's position. The temperature dropped 50 degrees in 30 seconds. Poisonous gas started venting from hidden nozzles. The ground itself began shifting and opening into surprise pit traps. Jake looked around as all this chaos erupted around him, and his face broke into the biggest smile they'd seen yet. "Oh, wow. You guys really stepped it up," he called out, apparently addressing the instructors directly through the monitoring cameras. "This is getting fun. Thanks for making it interesting." He proceeded to use a temperature drop to preserve some fruit he'd gathered earlier, filtered the poisonous gas through his shirt to create a makeshift insect repellent, and turned the pit traps into storage spaces for his extra equipment. The razor claws, apparently deciding this human was the most entertaining thing they'd encountered in years, stuck around to help. Vex opened his 6th bottle of antacids. His stomach felt like it was trying to eat itself from the inside out. "Corax," he said quietly, "I think we need to call for backup." 20 hours into Hell Week, the instructor monitoring room looked like a disaster zone. Empty antacid bottles littered Sergeant Vex's desk, while Sergeant Corax paced back and forth like a caged animal. Their carefully designed torture chamber had become Jake Miller's personal playground, and both instructors were questioning everything they thought they knew about military training. The breaking point came when Jake finished building what could only be described as a luxury campsite, complete with running water, climate control, and a dining area where he was apparently hosting dinner parties with the Razorclaw stalkers. The creatures had learned to bring him different types of edible plants in exchange for ear scratches and belly rubs. "This ends now," Corax growled, his massive hand shaking as he reached for the emergency protocols panel. Behind a clear protective cover marked with warnings in 17 different languages was a single red button labeled Final Scenario, Authorized Personnel Only. Vex looked up from his pile of antacid wrappers. "Corax, that's the void chamber. We're not supposed to use that until day 7, and only if cadets specifically request the impossible level challenge. It's never been completed successfully." "I don't care anymore," Corax replied, smashing through protective cover with his fist. "This human has made a mockery of everything we stand for. Either he fails this challenge, or I'm requesting a transfer to civilian duty." The Void Chamber was the Academy's most feared training scenario. It simulated the conditions of deep space. Complete vacuum, zero atmosphere, and a maze so complex that most beings couldn't solve it even with unlimited time and full life support. The record for surviving inside was 11 minutes, held by a cybernetic-enhanced Nexary who needed 3 days in the medical bay afterward. Klaxons began blaring throughout the training zone as massive blast doors slid open, revealing a chamber that looked like it belonged in a horror movie. Twisted metal corridors disappeared into absolute darkness, with no lighting except for the faint glow of emergency markers that indicated the path through the maze. The air started getting sucked out immediately as powerful pumps created a perfect vacuum. Jake looked up from where he'd been teaching one of the Razorclaws to fetch, brushing crumbs off his hands. "Ooh, a new room opened up," he said with genuine excitement. "This looks like fun. Thanks for the upgrade, guys." He walked toward the entrance as casually as someone heading to check their mailbox. At the threshold, he took a deep breath, the kind of breath someone might take before diving into a swimming pool, and stepped inside. The blast doors sealed shut behind him with a sound like thunder. In the monitoring room, both sergeants stared at the screens showing Jake's vital signs. His heart rate remained steady. His brain activity showed the focused concentration of someone working on an interesting puzzle rather than the panic of someone suffocating in space. He's treating it like a breath-holding contest, Vex whispered, crunching another antacid. Look at his movement patterns. He's not rushing, he's not panicking. He's just thinking his way through it. The maze that had been designed by the galaxy's top military engineers to be unsolvable was apparently just another interesting challenge to Jake. They watched him navigate the twisting corridors using a systematic approach, marking dead ends with small stones from his pocket and gradually mapping out the correct path. 15 minutes passed. Then 18. The previous record was shattered, but Jake showed no signs of distress. His movements remained calm and deliberate, like someone putting together a jigsaw puzzle on a lazy Sunday afternoon. How long can humans hold their breath? Corax asked, his voice cracking slightly. I don't know, Vex replied. I don't think anyone's ever bothered to check. At the 20-minute mark, Jake reached the center of the maze where a simple button waited to be pressed. He hit it with a satisfied smile, and the blast doors opened with a rush of air flooding back into the chamber. Jake strolled out, looking slightly windblown but otherwise perfectly fine. That was awesome, he called out to the monitoring cameras. It reminded me of this underwater cave system back home in Florida. My buddy Tommy and I used to see who could swim the farthest through it on one breath. I think I just beat my personal record. He paused, looking around expectantly. So what's next? Do you guys have anything even more challenging? Because this has been the best vacation I've had in years. That's when Sergeant Corax's eyes rolled back in his head, and all 8 feet of elite Draknari warrior crashed the floor like a felled tree. The medical alarm started blaring, just as Base Commander Lisa Hayes walked into the monitoring room. She'd come to check on the progress of Hell Week, and instead found one instructor passed out cold, and another one rocking back and forth in his chair, muttering something about humans being impossible. What exactly is going on here? Commander Hayes demanded, looking at the chaos around her. Vex looked up with the expression of someone who just witnessed the laws of physics break down. Ma'am, he said weakly, I think we need to redesign our entire training program. On the monitors, Jake Miller was doing jumping jacks to warm up, apparently ready for whatever challenge they might throw at him next. 24 hours after stepping off the transport, Jake Miller stood at the finish line of Hell Week, checking his watch and looking slightly confused. Around him, the twisted landscape of the training zone looked like it had been hit by a natural disaster. Emergency crews were working to repair systems that had been pushed far beyond their design limits, while maintenance robots struggled to clean up the creative modifications Jake had made to various obstacles. Is that it? Jake asked Commander Hayes, who had arrived with a full medical team and 3 backup instructors. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was really fun, but I thought military training was supposed to be harder than this. Commander Hayes stared at the tablet in her hands, scrolling through a list of broken records that seemed to go on forever. Fastest completion time, shattered by 6 days. Most creative problem solving, not even contest. First cadet to actually improve the training course while completing it, a category they'd had to invent just for Jake. Most friendly relationship with design predators, another new category. But the record that really made her head spin was listed at the bottom. First cadet to complete Hell Week, while the instructors required medical attention. Both Sergeant Corax and Sergeant Vex were currently in the base medical bay. Corax was being treated for what the doctors politely called acute stress-induced unconsciousness, while Vex was getting his stomach pumped due to severe antacid overdose. The base psychiatrist was reportedly having long conversations with both of them about career changes. Commander Hayes said carefully, this course was designed to take a full week. Most cadets who finish it all barely crawl across the finish line on day 7, half dead from exhaustion. You completed it in 1 day, and you look like you just finished a light morning jog. Jake shrugged, wiping some sweat from his forehead. Well, it did remind me of the summer camp I went to in Montana when I was 14. Camp Grizzly Peak. They called it character building. We had survived for 2 weeks in the wilderness with just basic supplies, and there were actual bears and mountain lions around, plus rattlesnakes, which were honestly scarier than those crystal claw things you guys have here. He paused, thinking, though I have to say, your acid rain was pretty clever. We just had regular rain that could give you hypothermia if you weren't careful. Oh, and flash floods. Those were always exciting. Commander Hayes made a mental note to look up this Camp Grizzly Peak and possibly recommend it be shut down for safety violations. The course you just completed has broken elite soldiers from across the galaxy, warriors who survived real combat zones, beings who've been genetically enhanced for survival, soldiers with decades of experience. Really? Jake looked genuinely surprised. Huh. Maybe they just weren't used to working with limited resources. My dad always said that growing up poor taught you to make something useful out of nothing. Plus, camping with my Uncle Rick was great practice. That guy could survive anywhere with just a pocket knife and a roll of duct tape. The cleanup crews had discovered several of Jake's improvements to the course that were actually better than the original design. His water collection system was so efficient they were considering making it a permanent feature. The shelter he'd built was being studied by the engineering department. And somehow, he'd managed to train the Razor Claw Stalkers to help maintain the equipment in their sector. Miller, Commander Hayes said slowly, I'm promoting you directly to Special Forces selection. Normally, cadets need to complete basic training, advanced training, and specialist courses before they're even considered for elite units. But I think we can safely assume you'll find those programs insufficient. Thanks, Jake said, his face lighting up. Will the Special Forces training be more challenging? Because I was really hoping to find something that would push me a bit harder. This felt more like a warm-up exercise. Behind Commander Hayes, 3 other instructors who had come to observe Jake's finish line performance quietly started discussing early retirement options. The aftermath of Jake's record-breaking performance sent shockwaves through Galactic Military Academy. Within a week, new protocols were implemented across all training facilities. These weren't safety protocols for cadets. They were safety protocols for instructors who might encounter humans in the future. All training staff were required to undergo psychological counseling before working with human cadets. Medical teams were placed on standby whenever humans entered challenging courses. And most importantly, a new warning was added to every human cadet's file. Species demonstrates casual competence in environments designed to break professional soldiers. Instructor mental health monitoring recommended. Sergeant Korax and Sergeant Vex, once they recovered from their medical treatments, were quietly reassigned to Galactic Military Academy's new branch campus on Peaceful Valley, a garden world inhabited by gentle herbivore species whose idea of military training involved learning to march in formation without stepping on flowers. Jake Miller, meanwhile, was fast-tracked through Special Forces selection in what military historians would later call record time. His final evaluation report contained a single line that became legendary throughout the galactic military. Candidate Miller has successfully completed all available training. Recommend developing new challenges worthy of human capabilities. At the bottom of the report, someone had added a handwritten note. For the love of all that's sacred, never assign this human to train new instructors. Our mental health coverage can't handle it. Jake never did find a training program that really challenged him, but he seemed happy enough just helping other cadets and occasionally giving the instructors helpful suggestions on how to make their courses more interesting. The Razor Claw Stalkers still gather around his old campsite, apparently hoping he'll come back to visit.